if you've identified the main forces that are driving things, if you've identified the demographic and political processes that are really underway, you're going to get a sense of what the century is going to look like. At the beginning of the 20th century, it was all about Germany. And if you understood that, you could really start to get a sense, not of the details, but of the way the century would unfold. Well, the 21st century is about the United States, and if you understand that, you can begin to forecast. For the Europeans, the age of America has passed several times this century. The Europeans delight in thinking about the decline of the United States. But when you look at the objective factors of American power, such as the American gross domestic product is larger than the next 3 or 4 countries combined, such as the fact that the U.S. Navy controls all of the oceans in the world, you find that the Europeans are focusing on passing bubbles, that the underlying reality is that American power is enormous. In 1980, for the first time in human history, trans-Pacific trade equaled transatlantic trade. This changed the world irrevocably. Until that point, the North Atlantic was the gateway to Europe and therefore the gateway to power. Now, Europe has not disappeared by any means. It's equaled by Asia. But both of those bodies of water are the trade routes. The United States is the only major power that's native to both bodies of water. And therefore, it has not only a trading advantage, but a military advantage. It can project its power into both the Atlantic and the Pacific. And therefore, ultimately, it controls the patterns of trade that exist. Destructive and creative capitalism go hand in hand, as has been said many times. And one of the strengths of the American system is that it destroys old industries and lets new ones be born. And one of the weaknesses of the rest of the world, particularly of Europe, is they don't let the old go. They hang on to it. At this moment, migration represents a problem for the advanced industrial world. But when we take a look at birth rates, life expectancy, we know 2 things. The population of all the advanced countries is declining. The number of people who are being old relative to young is increasing. In 20 years, we can expect countries that currently bar immigration to be competing for immigrants, going out and paying bonuses to immigrants who are prepared to come there and work. One thing the United States understands intuitively is how to integrate people into society. We've had a vast wave of immigrants over the past 30 years from South Asia and from East Asia. What is absolutely remarkable is the smoothness and ease with which they've integrated into American culture. When we look at this globally, this is going to be a huge problem. The Europeans aren't very good at handling immigrants. The Japanese are awful. The countries that are very good at this are the United States, New Zealand, Canada, Australia. That is the former English colonies. They've really mastered this, and this gives them a tremendous geopolitical advantage. What drives scientific development, not just in the United States but elsewhere, is war and the danger of war and the willingness of the society to spend money on technology for warfighting. So, for example, the Internet begins as a Defense Department project. The interstate highway system begins as a defense concept. American airlines begin as a military concept. It is the role of the world's leading power in the course of building its military engine to engage in fundamental scientific research, which in turn becomes the economy. The future of military science rests in space. A huge amount of American military power already depends on American forces in space. We're going to have to defend those forces, and above all, we have to power those forces. The solution to the oil shortages that are coming is going to be in solar power. But solar power on the face of the Earth doesn't work. You have night, you have clouds, and you'd have to have a huge number of collectors. The state of Arizona would have to be covered. It doesn't work. In space, solar power is there all the time, and it's free, and there's no night and there are no clouds. You can get that power back to Earth by a number of means, one of which is microwave energy. If you think this is science fiction, know that NASA has a program for space-based solar power right now. China historically cycles between periods of deep fragmentation and foreign involvement in China, and periods where it's isolated from the rest of the world, very centralized and quite poor. The Chinese have severe internal economic problems, the most important of which is that their entire economy depends on exports. The future of China depends on the willingness of Walmart to buy Chinese goods. If the United States catches cold, China catches pneumonia. And this is the problem that the Chinese have. They're not in control of their economy. My expectation is that we are going to see China fragment again. As to becoming a great power, that's almost impossible for China to do. Because even though it has a huge portion of humanity, geographically they're isolated. Between the Himalayas, impassable Siberia, the deserts of the West, and the Pacific Ocean, their ability to project power has never been very great. China's greatest challenge has always been to keep China together. Russia has already reemerged as a threat. Putin clearly has a strategy that Moscow should be the center of Russia and that Russia should be the center of the former Soviet Union. The moment that happens, Russia becomes a powerful force impinging on Europe. The decision by the West to expand NATO deep into the territories of the former Soviet Union really represents a fundamental existential challenge to Russia. If that were to happen, Russia's ability to survive would be deeply compromised. Its ability to do things for the good would be questioned because it would have hostile powers all along its borders. It is now moving to a point where it is confronting American and to some extent European power, Turkish power, powers in Central Asia. This will solidify into a confrontation, I suspect not a war, but a confrontation, and Russia will lose this confrontation again. This time, when it collapses, not only the former Soviet Union will collapse, but the Russian Federation itself will fragment.